When it comes to aim, there's a big misconception out there on what good aim actually is. Some thoughts you may have here are that players with good aim are those who just have insane mouse control and can adjust their aim precisely at a moment's notice. They can hit small flicks, long flick shots, all in the blink of an eye. While mouse control certainly is a part of good aim, an aspect of aim that gets forgotten and neglected is game sense. We'll be reviewing one of our viewers' VODs today to show you exactly what we mean, and if you get this, you'll be miles ahead in getting the aim you've always wanted. Thanks to our new community Discord, we were able to gather VODs from our viewers to create today's content. Thank you everyone for your submissions. Now let's get into it. One area that gets neglected in Valorant is the ability to read the enemy. If you can gather information and know where the enemy is positioned, you'll have a much better time placing your crosshair in the position it needs to be. A good majority of kills in Valorant is just outmaneuvering your enemy and thus giving yourself quote-unquote better aim, or an easier time of winning. Better yet, you'll have a gap in the enemy's defenses and be able to sneak your way through to a surprise angle that they weren't expecting you to be in. This clip is from a VOD submitted by our viewer Axel. Here he's in a clutch situation and does a good job of using Sova's abilities to deal chip damage initially and actually ends up grabbing a kill. From there, he ends up peeking from the same position multiple times in a row, and with the enemy having poor weaponry, he gets away with this and eventually grabs an additional kill before going up ropes and flicking down onto the last remaining player. So a decent position change at the end, although he did make a lot of noise with the rope and made himself predictable throughout the clutch. Had an enemy had better weaponry, this clutch play would have been much less likely, as there wasn't any sort of trickery or outmaneuvering that was done, such as changing up position or playing around with ropes to trick the enemy into thinking they were going up nest when actually they weren't. To show you a big brain example of outmaneuvering the enemy, we have a clip from FNS in Team Envy doing exactly that to Gambit. With the combination of his wall and Skye's ultimate, he identifies someone is holding U-Haul and tries to walk past him to either get a pick if the enemy peeks out or sneak through to spawn for a sneak attack. The latter occurs, and he gives a call for his team to teleport to B, which forces Gambit to rotate. This is where the Giga brain play occurs, and FNS catches Gambit completely off guard, granting him 2 free kills and delaying the third player from rotating to B. This was initially a rough round despite Gambit's low buy, but the outmaneuvering and calls by FNS and Envy allowed him to have a much easier time of picking off Gambit's players and winning the round. One of the best players at outmaneuvering and ratting is none other than Nats from Gambit. With the help of his team distracting G2, Nats gets an initial flank kill, but here's where the outplay occurs. Nats then drops down a cyber cage and uses it to block off the vision of G2. From here, he goes for a play that G2 didn't expect, in which he actually pushes through his own cage and ends up catching Jett and Skye off guard. He then goes back into his cage to find another surprise angle that doesn't end up working out, but the way Nats used cyber cage to outwit G2 is what allowed him to grab 2 additional frags and save the round. Versus, if he had just taken a more passive approach or hadn't used any abilities, he would surely have been peeked by multiple members of G2 and gotten easily wiped out. This clip particularly emphasizes how outplaying the enemy plays such a big factor in allowing you to out-aim them with your game sense. Speaking of outmaneuvering and out-aiming your opponents, if you want to learn more about how to get Radiant level aim, then head over to skillcapped.com. We have a ton of advanced courses for you to take, including a whole course dedicated to helping you become an aim god. The link will be in the description below. One of the biggest mistakes that we see players making is valuing quantity over quality. However, in the grand scheme of things, Valorant is mostly about quality over quantity, especially when you're using weapons that require insane precision, such as with pistols or sniper rifles, just the Operator and Marshall. In Masters Berlin, we see Heat from Vivo Keed hitting an insane 5k ace with the Marshall. Now, the speed in which he snags these kills is insanely fast, but Heat wasn't actually firing his shots as quickly as he could to grab these kills. Rather, he took his time, knowing that if he missed a shot, he'd have a big delay before being able to fire again. The pause and adjustment is ever so slight, but it's present before he tries to fire every shot. Heat also took advantage of the Viper wall to give him additional peeks after the initial kill. It's a risky play, but Heat knows the enemy is just on pistols and that he has a higher than normal chance of getting another kill safely. From there, he heard and saw 2 more players on site, where he does a phenomenal job of jiggle peeking after each job to make him a slippery target while also snagging the kills he needs. Even while running around for the final 2 kills, Heat takes his time to make sure his shots will hit. The combination of game sense where he took advantage of surroundings while also being slow and methodical with his shots is what allowed him to get this highlight clip. Now let's see what happens when we don't use a more precise orientated weapon and don't take our time. In this clip by Dave, aka Shmoo, you'll notice he's shooting the ghosts outdoors quite fast. Too fast that he's not letting the recoil reset and therefore giving himself a tougher time hitting his shots. In the second battle with Skye, we see him go for a peek and whiff his initial shots, and this is followed by some further panic shots as he tries to run away, knowing he failed to get the kill at first. A common reaction that many players will have, but the big issue here is not taking our time and also not giving ourselves a good position to get in and out of the fight. By holding a tighter, more narrow angle, Shmoo could have gone for the same fight. By taking some extra time to line up the pistol shots, he would have had more success than spamming left click. Along with that, by being closer to cover, he he can back out quicker to safety if needed, versus in the clip we just saw, he had taken 3 panic shots on the run before he was finally safe. Again, the key points are taking our time to land shots, especially when these sorts of weapons that require it, but also trying to utilize the map environment and abilities to essentially assist in aiming and landing the kills. Next up, one of the key aspects of having good aim is knowing where to position yourself. Putting yourself in the right spot can practically do 90% of the work when it comes to aiming and winning your duels. In this clip here we have Shmugai defending the B site after planting the spike. He ends up positioning himself in front of B main and watching arches and tunnels, which is questionable given the circumstances here. First, his teammate Viper is somewhat guarding arches and the tunnel to a certain degree, so she has that covered. That leaves B main that isn't being watched, so if Cypher was to play here, he should really be looking behind him towards B main. Regardless, this position is still incredibly open to 3 different points of attack. If we also look at the map, Shmugai had already placed a tripwire onto B main as well, so he can actually feel free to leave that area unattended and focus on arches and tunnels from the back of the site. If anyone goes B main, the tripwire will find them. When further back on the site where there is cover, you can isolate one position at a time and have a more focal point of focus. Being positioned in an area where there is cover to step away from helps give you an escape route to peek and then back away if your initial shot goes south. In the second clip, Shmugai goes for a relatively wide peek against the attackers pushing mid doors to A site. He ends up getting a kill there, however, with such a wide position, if all the attackers had turned their attention to him, he'd certainly be dead. Shmugai also ends up crouching, essentially fully committing to the duels and making it even harder for him to get away or to reposition. Rather than jiggling around to let the recoil reset to make himself a slippery target, he just stops shooting, which is not ideal to keep yourself stationary when you're not firing any bullets. An example of such a position is yellow on Icebox, where you can alternate peeking between your right and left. Hiko does an excellent job doing that in this clip to expose himself to only one enemy at a time. He utilizes cover incredibly well, jiggle peeking just enough to get into one-on-one duels rather than exposing himself to multiple players. This allowed him to get the 1 vs 3 red ball clutch, which would have been much harder to do had Hiko been playing in a more exposed position where he didn't have yellow as a backing. Again, the positioning and movement was crucial in helping him aim and get into the fights he wanted. Here's a more common example of how positioning plays a big factor in aiming and allowed Gambit to win this eco round. Jett is the slipperiest agent in the game, and taking advantage of her dash to make aggressive peeks without having to be punished is a key factor in her game. Here Defo uses the cover from the Viper Wall and Cyber Cage that's placed in A main to get in close for a surprise peek, where he then uses Blade Storm to grab a quick kill and dash to safety. This is a move that's normally risky, but the enemy doesn't expect someone to push through the utility, plus Jett being Jett is able to pull this off and get away unscathed. The second kill is grabbed through good positioning from Viper with the help of Skye's Seekers, which reveals someone is in the vents. With that information, Viper picks off an angle and has his crosshair positioned at the most common position Cypher would peek out from, and he wins the duel easily as a result. Viper snags a third kill by forcing Envy to come into vents and get into a close range duel that provides more favourable odds for a Spectre versing a rifle. This is exactly what happens and allows Viper to snag a third kill for the round by putting herself in an advantageous position for the engagement. The movement, information gathering, and advanced positioning with that information is what allowed the eco round to become so winnable for Gambit. Now, Valorant has really emphasized early on that the game is still going to be heavily based on raw aim, but that doesn't mean you can't use your abilities to help you out. Knowing how to use your abilities to make it easier to aim is huge to being able to snag easy frags and headshots. If you have something at your disposal to help you out, why not use it? Part of the reason duelists shine is they have abilities that help them aim and get easier kills. This includes flashes, dashes, teleports, and blast pack. Even agents outside of the duelists have abilities that will help make it much easier to aim and get kills. However, this only works if you take advantage of those abilities. In this clip, Shmugai uses his Cypher Cam to tag an enemy on the A side. He can easily pre-aim his crosshair and swing for the kill, so this is looking really good for him. Unfortunately, he didn't look close enough to notice that this was an AWPer he tagged, and he also didn't adjust his crosshair so that when he swings, he'd be on his head. So the initial setup and plan was great, but the final execution was a bit rushed when it didn't need to be. Now let's see an example of how the pros will use abilities to make it easier to win their aim duels. And one of the abilities that really shined is Astra's ultimate, Cosmic Divide. In this clip, Delzik peeks out screens slowly and methodically to get an isolated kill. He then knows someone just planted and is on site, so they're likely holding the elbow angle since their teammate's up on heaven. Knowing this, a short peek would have been too predictable, so Delzik wide swings and catches Brimstone off guard to get the second kill. From there, Delzik puts up a huge Cosmic Divide that blocks out players in heaven, essentially forcing them to push out to make sure Delzik doesn't get a free defuse. This is exactly what happens, and Delzik ends up getting 2 easy kills with the wall versus being put into a scenario where he'd have to challenge heaven and likely lose the round. Last but not least, being able to flick around the screen and land shots is flashy and all, but you can make things easier for yourself by knowing how you should get into certain duels in the first place. In short-range fights, there isn't too many specifics to pay attention to since enemy models are big and the fight should end quickly. But for mid-range and long-range fights, which you would most commonly experience on big maps like Icebox and Breeze, the way you want to take those duels is different. We'll go back to our boy Shmoo here, who waits out the smoke before hitting the A site, and he gets a pick on a player in the corner. From here he decides to go for a long-range fight against the Jett, who is an Odin. The way he approaches this fight is by scoping in, holding out his spray the whole time, and crouching. Scoping in is a bad habit that players need to break in general, as it changes the recoil and slows down your rate of fire. But the key points here we're focusing on are crouching and holding the spray. Controlling a rifle spray after the initial few bullets is incredibly hard to do, even for some of the top players in the game, since the recoil is so high, plus there is some RNG involved. What's better to do in these longer range fights if the first of the bullets misses is to actually stop and let the recoil reset before firing again. This ensures a more accurate set of bullets to give a better shot of killing the player versus spraying and praying. The other aspect is knowing that you'll be a vulnerable target during that brief period that you're waiting for the reset. You want to stay mobile and strafe to either the left or right to make yourself a harder target to hit. In the clip we just saw, the enemy had an Odin, so it's not as relevant, but if they had any other gun, this movement is key to dodging a few extra shots and buying you more time to land your shots. This is exactly what you'll see the pro players do, although you may see it more rarely as the top level players won't miss that initial burst too often. That's all we have time for in this video. Now go out there and become the Viper Master that you were born to be. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get more premium guides just like this one, with one goal in mind: helping you become a better player. We here at Skill Capped want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Good luck out there.